Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We do apologise about the lateness again, but tech is obviously not working on our side again. And obviously, this evening I'm on my own. Carl, unfortunately, can't make it, but obviously I am joined by a very interesting guy with a nickname, and his name is Sandman. Good evening.
Hello. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. So how are you today?
I am doing great. How about you?
I'm fine, thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here on the show. I've been looking forward to this.
And because obviously we spoke quite ages ago, don't we, about getting you on, and then
yeah.
So obviously we're good. Obviously, because I know what got you into the paranormal. So could you let all of us listeners know what got you into the paranormal?
Yeah, sure. I'll be more than happy to. So when I was around 9 or maybe 10 years old, I was trying to sleep. I've always had problems sleeping my whole life since I was a kid, and I was trying to sleep one night, and I just kind of wasn't sleeping very well, and I woke up just all of a sudden just wide awake, and I was trying to get back into a sleep mode, and I heard coming from my parents' room the sound of soft footsteps, like someone, like if you were walking barefooted on some thick carpeting, kind of a little silent crunching type deal. And we had my mother, even to this day, just cannot sleep unless there is a light on somewhere. So she had a tiny nightlight burning in the hallway. And so I could see very well the hallway and the doorway to my room and everything. And I thought it was the family dog at first coming into my room. And I didn't see the dog. And then I thought, well, maybe it's my mother. But I never saw my mother either. And these footsteps continued and I walked across the hall, got to the threshold of my door and stopped and didn't make another move for just a minute. And then I heard a deep sigh and like a smacking of the lips. It kind of went like that. Mm-hmm. And then the footsteps turned and walked down the hall and disappeared. And it scared the hell out of me. I had no idea what it was. And that's how I became interested in the paranormal. And as far as I know, the land that my house on has nothing, it's not like an ancient Native American burial ground. There's nothing ever bad ever happened there as far as to my knowledge. And we were the only family to ever live in that house. My mother still lives there to this day, and she's never had anything weird happen to her at all. And I know that I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't dreaming. I was wide awake, and I can't explain it other than maybe it was just someone or something just passing through and just decided to pop in and see what was going on and then left. I don't know.
Oh. So was that the only incident you had then?
Yeah, at that location, yes, at my childhood home, that was the only thing that I ever had happen up until I was, guess I was in my early 20s, and it was right after my father died. He died unexpectedly, and I had been living on my own. And I had been trying to work and go to school and pay the bills and everything, and it just wasn't working out. And I had made the decision that I was going to move back home so I could go to school full time and not have to worry about paying bills and stuff. And so my father had after I did this, my father had died. He and my mother were divorced, and he did not live anywhere close to us. And I got a phone call that he had been in an accident, and make a long story short, he wound up passing away. And it was probably about maybe a couple of months after that, I had the most vivid dream of my whole entire life where, not to bore everybody, but I was trying to speak to a big crowd of people and get a message across to them, and I couldn't make them hear me. And It was I don't know if you get Bugs Bunny cartoons over there in the UK, but if you ever seen Bugs Bunny where he goes underground and he tunnels around, and that's what I was doing in my dream. I was traveling from place to place under the ground, popping up, trying to get this big message, and no one would understand me. And my dad just appeared out of nowhere, and he had this very long conversation with me about how everything is going to be okay, and that I don't have to worry, and that my message will get across and everything is going to be fine. And that was, like I said, the most vivid dream that I've ever had. It was very real to me. And that was, in a sense, it was my dad reaching out from beyond the grave. He was visiting me, telling me how everything was going to be okay. And we had a lot of unresolved issues between the two of us, and we did not get to have that closure before he passed. And I think that was his way of coming to me from wherever he is and saying, it's okay, everything is good, you're going to be fine, and so am I.
Wow. A lot of that, and I've spoken to, like, obviously a lot of people with you saying about your dad, and that I've heard a few stories where people have had, like, dreams and things like that from people who have passed, and it's kind of like I'm at peace and kind of thing. Especially, obviously, with what, obviously, sadly, what happened with your dad.
Yeah, like I said, it was probably, even to this day, the most vivid dream that I've ever had. It was, everything was in color, and it was so real. If when he reached out and touched me, I could feel his hands on my shoulders, and I've never ever had a dream like that before or since.
So obviously, going a little bit back to when. So did you end up telling your mum that obviously you heard footsteps in the home?
I don't ever remember discussing that with my mother. I thought about this over the years, and I can't remember if I ever told her about that or not. But I have asked her if she's ever experienced anything weird or unusual in the home, and I've asked her several times, and she's always said no.
Oh.
Yeah, like I said, I don't have an explanation for it other than maybe it was just someone passing through, the spirit of someone or something passing through, and just decided to randomly pick a house and see what was going on. And it's like, oh, everybody in here is asleep. This is boring. I'm out.
It could have easily been a family member. You never know, do you? So
it could have been, but at that point in my life, I was so young. I had not yet lost any of my family members. I had one grandfather who died well before I was even born. He died when my dad, it was like, I think my dad was 16 when he died. So he never, I don't think that would have been any connection, but you never know.
And obviously it is known as well that spirits can just kind of like pop in and be like, they don't have to necessarily be attached to the person or the location.
Right. That's why I think it was probably just somebody just, passing through, just, checking that place out just to see what the heck was going on.
Yeah, and obviously because I've seen it obviously from your bio, it's obviously it's something which is obviously good that you picked it up, because obviously I'm trying to get my words out, sorry. Obviously, because it's just like sometimes, like I've personally never heard footsteps on a carpet. It's usually like wooden flooring, and that's obviously what makes it interesting, that obviously it woke you up because you heard the footsteps on the carpet. That's what's interesting about that.
Yeah, and like I said, I at first I thought it was my mother coming, like maybe she was coming into my room or going down the hall or something like that. So I was waiting to see somebody, and I never saw anything. And I had a clear view of the doorway, the hallway, from floor to ceiling. It's not like I missed anything. It wasn't the family pet. And it just freaked me out. And that's kind of what started me from that early age into the world of the paranormal. And I remember at some point in time, my mother had this book. It was about the Bermuda Triangle by the author was named Charles Berlitz, I believe is his name. And I didn't know what the Bermuda Triangle was. And I remember looking at the book and I was like, Mom, what's this? What are you reading? And she told me all about the Bermuda Triangle. And that just kind of blew my mind. I was like, wow, I didn't know there were places out there like that, and that was obviously way before the internet and everything and smartphones and all this other sorts of stuff. So I, had to check out stuff from the library and try to read all I could from the library at school or the public library. And when I was a kid growing up, one of the most popular books amongst all of the kids was this book called 13 Alabama Ghosts and Jeffrey, because I'm from the state of Alabama, and this person wrote about all of the famous ghost stories that were circulating in Alabama, and there were 13 of them. And then the Jeffrey part of it was about their personal experience with their own ghost that they had named Jeffrey. And that book kind of made its way. Every kid in the school that I was going to was reading this book. It was completely worn out. And after I read that, I finally had my turn. And after I read that and knew that there were stories that were in books, then it was like, okay, it's on now. Now I'm going to find out all I can about this. So I started reading all I could, and I started watching the In Search Of series, the original one that was narrated by Leonard McCoy, and had a episode on that really just scared the hell out of me on that. And that was like the first TV show that I can remember from my generation. Of course, this was back in the late 70s that really focused on stuff like that, and I really just couldn't get enough of stuff like that. And I'm still, to this day, I'm still just, trying to soak it all in, suck up as much knowledge as I can.
Yeah, and obviously you can't beat a great book though, can you? Even today.
Yeah. You try to do as much research as you can, and you try to study as much as you can. You try to investigate as much as you can. But I think really in the end, the only way we're going to know what's on the other side is we're just going to have to go there ourselves, and I would love to be proven wrong. Maybe someday there'll be some sort of Ghostbusters thing where they can use some sort of energy weapon to capture somebody in a Faraday cage or something. I don't know. But, I think that for me, at least in my generation, I think the only way to know is to, we're going to have to go there. You don't necessarily go there and then come back either. So that's the downside.
So what obviously going on from then, how many years after then, obviously, was it when you first went to your proper haunted location?
Oh, wow. It was such a long time. Trying to think, I was probably, I'm going to say I was in my, it's probably like 16 or 17. So it was almost 10 years before I could go to any haunted location. And there were none. I grew up in a very small town in Southeast Alabama here in the United States. And there was nothing close to my town. I mean, it was, you had to travel for hours to get to the big city, and so I couldn't just get up and, pack up and go. But we did have this one area that was in my hometown that, this is going to sound so stupid, but they called it Headless Horseman Road. And I cannot remember why they called it Headless Horseman Road, but it wasn't because there was a headless horseman roaming around on there. But it was rumored that there was a stretch of it that was haunted. There was a cemetery that was somewhere on the road, and that stretch of road by the cemetery was supposedly haunted by, I think it was, I'm trying to remember the story. It's been so long. I think it was not by someone who was in the Civil War, but it was during that era. And supposedly that person was killed, and he was roaming that stretch of the road to try to, I don't know, find his killer or just haunting the area or whatever. I can't remember. But of course, when I was 16 or 17, a couple of friends and I went down there and see if we could, scare up anything. And of course, we didn't know what we were doing, and we didn't do anything. We just scared ourselves mainly.
I think everybody does that though, don't they, at a young age, to be honest.
Yeah. Especially, when you have no idea what you're doing. Yeah. And if you're young and stupid and go with a bunch of friends.
Maybe obviously with that's what you're saying, maybe they called it the Headless Horseman, whatever, because maybe that person who died close to the cemetery lost his head. I don't know.
I cannot remember the story on that. It has been so long, but it wasn't because someone lost their head. I know that, but they called it Headless Horseman Road. I think just because that was the thing to do. I don't know. Who knows?
Probably make it more interesting.
Yeah, someone probably did it to make it more interesting. Yeah.
Kerry in the chat room says, "Have you been back there since?"
That road used to be a dirt road, and they have since paved that. Probably about 20 years ago, they paved it, and now there's a bunch of homes and condominiums and stuff on it. And I don't even know where exactly where the grave, that was a small cemetery. I don't even know where that is anymore. It's still there. But I haven't been there in a long time. It just, after it got, the road got paved and people started living on it, down it and everything, it kind of, the legend kind of just died,
It's a shame really, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you'd never know if obviously they've built on it and that it could still be haunted.
I've always thought about that. I wonder if any of the people who are living close to that area have anything weird happen to them. I would like to go down, and I need to go down and find out one day next time I travel back home.
Yeah, that'll be good. Obviously, don't be like knock on random strangers' doors like
just knock on the door. Excuse me, sir, is your condo haunted? Yeah.
Sandman, we are joined by the lovely Kerry now.
Hi, Kerry.
Hello. Good evening. How are you both?
Good.
I'm so sorry. The internet crashed. That's why we was a bit late. So I do apologise.
It happens. The internet crashes all the time over here too.
Oh, I'm normally all over it, but the kids didn't tell me it crashed. So when I sat down at the computer, I was like, oh my God. Oh dear. So what have I missed, guys?
Well, we took a vote and we decided you're buying lunch.
Oh, okay. Where do you fancy going?
Wherever hey, it's your hometown. You recommend it.
Okay. I have the perfect place in mind. A good
Great.
Traditional English pub.
Great. I'll pop right over. I'll be there in a minute.
No problem. Sam?
Yeah. Is it haunted?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is actually.
Great.
But they won't let us investigate it because there's people living there. And like you were saying, like you can't just knock up to someone's door and say, oh, do you have any activity? Can I investigate it? Oh. It is a difficult one, isn't it? Like you were saying about the condominiums that are now built on that land. And it's like these people live in the pub. They kind of don't want anything like, they don't want anyone in. So it's a shame. But we have plenty of places in the UK which are just as good.
I think the UK has places that are probably a lot better than over here in the States because, you've been around long. Well, the United States has been here. It's just you've been populated longer.
Well, that's true. So if you came to the UK, what would be one of your top, where would you want to go to investigate? I know we have a lot, but where would we like to go? Where would you like to go?
Well, I have actually been to London a couple of times, and it was not on to investigate the paranormal. It was just vacation stuff. But I've always wanted to go to the Tower of London, and I did that. Of course, you have to go through the touristy thing, and go through with everybody else. But I would love to investigate the Tower of London and everything around it, just not as a tourist. I would love to just have access to it for just 10 or 12 hours. Just let me run around in there.
Yes. we, in fact, everybody in the UK who is into investigations would like to do the same.
Yeah. That was really original on my part, I'm sure. Yeah.
No, because it is one of those locations that you would love to investigate. You're just never going to get the chance to. They just don't allow it. And I looked into seeing whether or not we could get around it somehow by doing, because they do actually rent out the restaurant area. And I thought, well, if we do a paranormal convention type talk night, then maybe they would let us investigate certain areas, but they wouldn't. I was like, oh, well, I'm not doing my talk there then.
Oh,
well. Which is a real shame. But where's in America is like that, which you would love to get in and investigate, but you just wouldn't get the chance to?
Oh, geez. There is, I actually live right outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and there is this really famous historic hotel downtown Nashville called the Hermitage Hotel, and they have a couple of ghosts supposedly in there, but they don't let people in to investigate, and they don't publicly advertise that they've got these things. And I would love to be able to get in there and see for myself exactly what's going on.
Do you think you'll ever get the chance to?
Absolutely not. I think the only way that I would be able to do it was if I didn't tell them what I was doing and stayed there overnight as a guest and tried to get I can't remember the room that's supposedly haunted, but try to get that room or a room that's as close to it as I possibly can, and just kind of do what I call guerrilla investigating, which is to clandestinely sneak around with your cameras and stuff. I'm sure you've never done that at all.
Never, ever. No one ever admits to it anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, I did investigate this one hotel very similar to that called the Jerome Grand, I think that's what it was, in Jerome, Arizona, which is an old mining town, and it's literally built up the side of a mountain. And the hotel it used to be a hospital for the town, and they had a lot of mining deaths and stuff, and it's haunted. And I stayed there overnight, and just for one night, and did a guerrilla style investigation there, and I actually caught something as I was checking out, believe it or not. I was stayed there with my girlfriend, and we were getting ready to get on the elevator to go down to the lobby to check out, and I just was waiting for the doors to open, and you know how you see something out of the corner of your eye just go by real quick, and I saw this black shadow figure out of the corner of my eye go by, and I told her, I was like, I'll meet you down in the lobby. And so I turned around and I ran in the direction that I saw this thing, and it had gone down the stairs. So I ran down the stairs to the next level, and of course there was nothing there. And I just took a couple of I had just so happened to have my camera with me, and I took a couple of random pictures down the hall, and you couldn't see it on the naked eye, but when you looked at the camera and on the picture, there was a orb right in the spot where I saw that entity go. And it was just the biggest, roundest, whitest orb that was not there whenever I took the picture. And it does not appear to be dust. I kind of ruled that out. And I kept going down the hall, and if it was a person, the only thing they could have done was have gone in one of the rooms, in which case I probably would have seen or heard the doors open or closed. And at the very end of the hallway, there's an area that was closed off because they were renovating it. And so you couldn't go through that way. So whatever it wasn't a person. And I just happened to just get lucky, I think, as I was leaving to see that entity and capture something on my digital camera.
That's good then, obviously, that you could, although it was just an orb, because that's the worst thing when you see something and you want to record it with a phone or a video camera or, a digital camera. Then you try to capture it, and then you take photos and you're like, don't capture it, and you're like, damn it. And then
I saw it. It was there.
People will just look at you like, yeah, but where's the proof? And you're like, I saw it.
Yep, exactly.
So would you say you're like on the more skeptical side? You go in with the mind to, is that where your head is, or do you just go and just see what happens?
No, absolutely. I am what I call an open-minded skeptic. Mm-hmm. I know that there's something that happens to us after we die. I just don't know what it is, and I'm looking for that proof. I know it's there, but until I have some hard scientific proof, I can't tell you, with 100% certainty that yes, something happens to us after we die. We there's something of us that still survives. I'm about 80% sure, but I want to be 100%. And just because someone tells me something, or just because there's a legend about a place or something like that, or stories, I'm not going to take all that stuff for face value. I want to see and experience those things for myself. And sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
And that's just how it goes, isn't it? I mean, we've all been in places where nothing's happened all night, and it's the most boring thing when you're just sitting there waiting. So name some of the places we might have heard of that you've investigated, because you have so many iconic places in America.
Yeah, I've investigated Waverly Hills Sanatorium twice. I did not capture anything on video or digital or anything. I had a few personal experiences, and one of my crew had an experience with a black mass, is what she described it as, that scared the hell out of her. It rushed toward her. It didn't attack her. She said she didn't feel like she was attacked, but it just she saw this big black mass rush toward her and then disappear. And it really affected her, scared her. And we had to get her out of the investigation and just have her go outside for a little while. It scared her so bad. But there's plenty of shadow people in Waverly. I could see them with my eye, but it was that case like you were talking about. I couldn't capture anything on digital or digital. Nothing. It's just I couldn't get it. And I've investigated this house called the Whaley House, which is excuse me. It's in Old Town San Diego in California. It's not really as popular as a lot of the other places, but it's been featured on a couple of those ghost hunting shows. I think maybe the Ghost Hunters did. It was either Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures. One of the two of them, maybe both did. They both kind of investigated that place, and I was able to do an investigation. I went there at night, and I went there during the day, and I really didn't capture anything during the day, obviously, but I got a couple of good EVPs at night of some voices of people who obviously weren't in the room or weren't there at all. Once again, I got nothing on a video or anything like that. I'm trying to think if there's another famous place that I investigated. Those are probably about the only two famous places that I've investigated here in the States.
But it is nice to keep off the beaten investigated track, or the high profile ones sometimes, isn't it? And do the little less known ones that there's not been too much disturbance of the energy that's within the place. So it is quite nice sometimes, isn't it? Because Sam did little weekend away, and it wasn't a very well-known place you did, was it?
Which I don't know.
Were you sober during this year?
I was going to say, when you went away on the weekend?
The weekend just gone.
No, you went away for a weekend to do an investigation.
Oh, I've been loads of places.
She does a lot. She does do a lot, Sandman. I don't. I just sit behind a computer desk and talk to people a lot. I'm a reader. I'm one of those annoying research people that everyone hates.
Yeah, I like to stay and do places that aren't, popular and that you see on TV, because you see the places on TV and, oh gosh, everybody wants to go visit those places and investigate. And the thing about that is if it's a popular place, by the time you get there, they have probably monetized this, and there's no way you're going to get to investigate that place unless you pay them some money.
True.
And I don't know about you guys, but I make zero from doing my podcast, and I get nothing for doing any type of investigation. So it already cost me money to do this. I don't necessarily want to pay you another however many hundreds of dollars you're going to charge me and a team of people to go through there. And then I don't want to be part of, the tourist group that goes there and does their investigation, because you're going to get every, Scooby-Doo Club person in the world there with you who's just running around, contaminating everything. So it's a fine line, if how bad do you really want to investigate this place? Because it's going to cost you some money if it's a famous place. At least that's how it works here in the States. I don't know how it works over there where you ladies are, but it kind of sucks.
Exactly the same. Yeah. It's exactly the same thing. I mean, we don't earn anything from doing, the work on the podcast, and exactly the same situation. It's a hobby. It's something we love. It's that passion. It's that learning, that knowledge that you gain every time something happens, or you find a new, blog or thesis or something that you want, about it. And it is that keeps you going in it. So tell me about your sorry, Sam, I'm taking over a little bit here. Tell me about your podcast that you do.
Yeah. So in, let's see, 2000, it's been a minute, when the internet was more at its infancy, I guess, I had thought that I wanted to get into to doing some sort of internet radio. And this was way back before the term podcasting anyone had ever thought about this. And I had a lot of free time on my hands. I was working at that time. I was working for the government. So, if you've ever worked for the government, or you know anyone that works for the government, you got a lot of free time on your hands.
Was you a man in black?
No, I wasn't. But I did have a top secret clearance, though, and I know things I can't tell you about.
Really?
Yes.
Ooh, now I'm intrigued.
But that was a long time ago. So, I've always had an interest in radio from the time I was a kid. And at one point in time, I thought that I wanted to be a DJ. And my stepsister actually got a job at a radio station, and sometimes she would let me tag along to work with her. She wasn't a DJ. She worked in production behind the scenes. And I got to learn that here in the States, the DJs don't make anything, and they work a lot of hours. And I was like, screw that. I'm not doing that, And so I was, you fast forward and I'm thinking, oh man, there's this internet thing. Maybe I can do my online radio station and be a DJ on the internet. So I had been doing research, and then I had an opportunity to move to Nashville in October of 2002. So when I moved up here, I really knew like one person in this whole big town. And I had, once again, a lot of free time on my hands. So I started looking back at getting into internet radio. And I found that it was hella expensive back then. It hasn't gotten any better, really. But I wasn't making the kind of money then that I could afford to dump into it. And so I found this little website that would let you do your own talk show. It wouldn't necessarily let you play music, but you could, because they didn't have the technology, but you could, if you had a computer and a microphone, you were in, and so I got me this headset with a microphone in it. Looks like you're flying an airplane type deal, and had no idea what I was doing. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this. But I didn't know what I wanted to do because they wouldn't let you play music. So I started listening to a lot of people who were doing their talk radio shows. And this website was called Alternicast. And I started listening to a lot of people on Alternicast, and it was like kids who were like doing prank phone calls, and people who they would have the WWE wrestling up on their TV, and they would do color commentary, just kind of stupid stuff. And I didn't want, I'm like, I don't want to do something like that. And I don't know what I'm going to do. And one night I was driving home from work. It was late at night, and I was looking for something to listen to on the radio, and I came across Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. And I know you know what I'm talking about with that.
Hell yeah.
And I was like, holy shit, that's it. I'm going to do a paranormal themed talk show because no one else was doing that. So I started doing that. And I did it for a couple of months. It was, oh God, those shows were so horrible. I didn't know what I was doing, and the sound quality was pitiful, and it was just really bad. And then I only did just a handful of shows, and then out of the blue, the Alternicasts, it folded, and everyone that had sunk money into it to do their quote radio show, we just lost all of our money. And so then that's when I found Live 365. And so I was like, screw it. I'm just going to go for it. So I started broadcasting on Live 365. And actually, I did that for several years. And I was that's how the show got the name Para Reality Radio, was because back then it was radio, not podcasting. Oh. And so, we're still doing the same thing today. It's just now it's called podcasting. It's not necessarily internet radio anymore, Yeah. But I had already had this name brand built up. And so I had to keep the radio part of it. And I was actually, for several years there, my show was the number one talk show for its genre on Live 365, and I had a lot of following, and that internet talk show led me to, I did a 2.5-year stint on terrestrial radio here in the Nashville area. That kind of led me to that. I was contacted by someone who was starting up a radio station, and they asked me if I would be interested because they were looking for DJs, and I was like, hell yeah, I'm interested. And I did that for a little while, and I had, I had one show a week. I had a show the first and third Friday of every month on Live 365, and the second and fourth Friday of every month I had it on WRFN here in Nashville. And so I was doing a lot, and it was like every week, I was doing a radio show, and then I had a newsletter that I was trying to do and a website I was trying to maintain, and I was making no money. And my girlfriend, and at some point I decided I'm going to go back to school too. So I'm doing all this stuff, and I had like zero time for my girlfriend, and we were living together, and she was like, you're going to have to quit one of these things. Pick one. So I quit the radio station. And then eventually I had to quit the internet radio too, just so I could finish school. So I took a break for a few years, like 2.5, 3 years, and then I just missed it. And so I'm like, I'm going to come back. And when I came back, it's podcasting now. Who knew?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, yeah. And I one of the things that I did, which I really regret, was I didn't want back then. I didn't want anyone to know who my real name was, just in case someone in the area heard me. And I didn't want, because you had that at that point, you had that negative stigma that was attached to anything like this. It wasn't as mainstream and accepted. So I'm like, I need to, think of something to go by and not use my real name. And then, of course, you hear the radio, and that's the radio station played Enter Sandman by Metallica, and I'm like, I'm gonna be named Sandman. And that has stuck. I can't get rid of it now, so I have to keep using it. I wish I wouldn't have done that, but it is what it is.
Oh, I think it's quite catchy, and it definitely keeps you standing out in people's minds.
Well, that was one of the reasons I wanted to do it, because I wanted to keep a real air of mystery about the show, and just be this voice with this one word name, and no one ever saw this dude or knew anything about him, but yet I like to listen to him on the radio. So
you have a great voice too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, flirting with you now.
Oh, yeah. Hey, call me after the show.
Oh, I will. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sam. Flirting with your guests. So, all the time you've done the radio, you must have had some amazing interviews that stand out in your mind, or topics that you've discussed. So, give us a flavour of what your favourites have been over this time.
Oh, two of my favorites that people that I've interviewed, hands down. I interviewed Scott Walter from America Unearthed. He is an amazing guy. And if you've ever seen that show, he's kind of opinionated. And he's exactly that same way in real life. And I also interviewed Nick Redfern, who has a wealth of knowledge about all kind of weird things. And that was a really good interview. I kind of would like to think, oh God, I'm friends with Scott Walter and, Rick Redfern, but they don't know who the hell I am. They probably don't even remember me, because I do so many of these interviews. But those were two really standout interviews. And one guy that I interviewed, he did not want me to use his real name. So we made up a fake name for him. I interviewed him way back when I was on Live 365, and he was a former Marine, and he had some experiences that he talked to me about. And one of the things that really stood out was, and now you have to take this for what it is, because this is just his story, so you don't know, you have to take it with a grain of salt, as we say. But one of the things that he told me was that he had a memo that was on his desk that he says should not have been there because it had nothing to do with him and what his mission was in the Marine Corps, that it was obviously meant for someone else and had somehow gotten mixed up in some papers. But he had a memo on his desk that was talking about the HIV virus and how it was really a government invented disease that had kind of like, typical movie thing where, it escapes containment and stuff. But I don't know how true that is. You had to take that with like I said, you had to take it with a grain of salt. I don't know how true that is. I don't have any reason to not to believe him. He did seem very believable, and he wasn't trying to make a big deal about it. He wasn't. He didn't try to write a book. He wasn't going on a lot of talk shows and everything like that. He just. He had just, as far as I know, my show is the one and only interview that he ever did about the whole thing. So, maybe
it was.
Is he
still alive?
Yes, he is.
Okay, that's good. Just saying, a conspiracy theory going off in my head all over the place there.
He is still alive, but you know what? He's not healthy, and I still keep in contact with him, and I tell him he's the unhealthiest healthy person that I ever know, because he goes to the gym and he exercises, he works out, he's active he does a lot of outside yard work and stuff, but he has a lot of things wrong with him, and they are trying to connect it to the Gulf War syndrome. And the funny thing about it is, though, when he was in the Marine Corps, he was in during the first Gulf War back in the 90s, and his unit got activated like I think 3 or 4 times, but they never actually went and saw combat, but every time they got activated, they would get, immunization shots like for malaria and all that other sorts of stuff. And, he made the comment that, hey, man, I just got this shot last week. Why are you giving me these same shots again? And they're like, shut up. We're just giving it to everybody to make sure. And they're trying to connect those vaccinations that the fact that he got so many over such a short period of time, they're connecting that to being a cause of Gulf War syndrome. So, maybe they gave him a little extra something. Who knows?
You don't know. And there are so many stories about government conspiracies, and it does seem that they're based more on the America political front and military front than we see in the UK. We don't often get a conspiracy theory in that way linked to the UK. Yeah. We get Princess Diana's death, that sort of thing. But the main lot of conspiracies do seem to come out of America, don't they?
They sure do. Yeah, especially right now with our dumbass president that we've got. There's his fake news stuff is all over the place, and you don't know what's real and what's not anymore. It's sad that, our leader is helping to perpetrate that stuff. It's just that's one thing we don't need, right? But I'm not going to get into political debate, please. This is not.
Oh, no. It's not what it's about. We're talking about the paranormal and your radio career. We just went off on a little side angle because of your man. That's all. So in that whole time, I'm sure it's gone horribly wrong with guests before now, and I don't expect you to name the guests where it's gone horribly wrong. But are there any standout interviews where you're thinking, oh, my God, no?
Yes. Oh, gosh, I could name just so many off the top of my head. You probably hear my creepy clock in the background. Sorry about that.
No, it's great. Adds atmosphere.
It does. Every time I do a podcast, my creepy clock goes off. So one that comes to mind was this guy. Gosh, I can't remember how long ago it's been. It doesn't really matter. He did there was some 1 hour long paranormal TV show, something like My Paranormal Story or something like that, way back in the probably the mid 2000s, the early mid 2000s, and they had his story as one of those episodes, and he was reaching out to people to interview him, and he had somehow gotten my email address, probably from my website, and emailed me and said, hey, I want to tell my story and blah blah blah. So I had this guy on, and I could not get him to shut up. It was just one of those things where he was just rambling and not making really any sense, and he was just all over the place. And every time I would try to interrupt him to ask a question or something, he would just talk over me and just keep going. It was the
can't direct the conversation at all into any form of coherence.
I know it made no sense. He had no direction. It was probably because he was nervous. That's what I'm going to say. But yeah, it was horrible. And another interview that I did was when I was working at WRFN. I had a guest that was in the studio, and she was. Her story was that she would have sexual intercourse with a ghost. And she was telling one of these sexual stories. And now remember, this was terrestrial radio, so we had to it was FCC that was applying to this. So we couldn't be too graphic about it. So I'm trying to keep this lady, don't use the colorful terms and just keep it, don't drop the F-bomb and don't get too graphic with it. And during the middle of this, while she's going on with this description of what it was like to have intercourse with a ghost, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I got the most horrible case of diarrhea. And I was like, I had to turn my mic off and whisper in here. I was like, whatever you do, don't stop talking. Keep going. And so I had to run down the hall to the bathroom, and I come back like 10 minutes later, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And her exact words to me were like, it's the spirits. They don't want you talking to me about this. I was like, it could be. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows, right?
But that was one of my that was probably my most embarrassing moment. But yeah, over the years, I've managed to talk to a lot of people. I like to specialize in people who are just like me and you. You know, you haven't written a book and you're not trying to get on a TV show. You know, you have this story and you want to tell it. And maybe you're looking for answers or closure, or maybe you just need to tell the story. Just normal, everyday people. That's who I like to talk to. And yeah, you know, I've talked to some of the more famous people, you know, and people who have TV shows and people who've done books and stuff. And you know what? It's surprisingly easy. Most of the time, if you can find out how to get in contact with them, which everybody has a social media account, a lot of times you just reach out to them and say, hey, I've got a podcast. I'd love to interview you sometime. And they're like, sure, let's do it. And it's that simple.
Yeah, it is. And everyone's very approachable.
Yes.
That's the thing I think I've found over the time, and I'm sure Sam would agree. You know, you can approach these people, and they are really approachable. Sam?
Yeah, but there is somewhere, yeah. I won't go into anything, but you know.
Yeah,
sometimes it's pinning it down into their schedule, isn't it? That's all that is. Yes. Sometimes it's the scheduling that becomes the issue. But eventually, if you're tenacious enough, you get it.
Yes, and most of the time they have, you know, something that they're wanting to push anyway. So they've just written a new book, or they've, you know, got this documentary that's coming out, or whatever. So if they're in that mode of I'm trying to get all the publicity that I can, and you reach out to them and say, hey, I want to interview you. Well, here's free publicity, man. So sure, I'm going to come on, you know. And it's really that, like I said, it's that simple most of the time.
So is there anybody that you would like to interview but you haven't managed to pin down yet?
Yeah, there are. There's a list of people. I really would like to interview, and this is probably going to sound cheesy, but I would love to interview Zach Bagans.
Oh, I think we all would.
Yeah, I know, right? I would also like to, excuse me, I'd also like to interview Jason Hawes from Ghost Hunters. I think he is let's face it, the Ghost Hunters show that's the model that everyone's, you know, modeling all their shows after, you know, is because if you look at the Ghost Hunters show when they came on back in 2004, they had this thing where the first part of it was, okay, we've been contacted by these people because they're having XYZ happen. And then they get the little tour, and then they do the investigation, and they have the little cut through interviews. Well, everybody does that. That's the model that everybody uses when they have a show, just about. And they had so much influence on the paranormal community as far as the way we investigate, the equipment that we use, the techniques that we use, and even helping the field of the paranormal become more mainstream. And I would really love to have the opportunity to sit down and talk to this guy and just, you know, find out, just pick his brain.
I know. And he is one of those. Like, Sam is one of Sam's favourite people, isn't it? Sam?
Zach, yeah.
Yeah. But I've always said he knows a lot more.
Not that I don't like Jason, but no.
But with Zach and people like that, they know so much more than what you see on the TV. Do you know what I mean? There's a completely different side to their paranormal experience. Yes, they put it out on TV, but they've got to kind of know what they're doing as well, as much as create a piece of theatre. So that's the bit, I think, dead honest. I'd like just pure honesty of coming out of their opinions and their experiences and their belief systems and what they've discovered along the way. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, when Ghost Adventure first came on, I saw the documentary and I was impressed with the evidence they captured, but I could not stand Zach Bagans. And then they got this TV show, and I thought, well, let me check this TV show out because I knew the documentary. And not only could I not stand, I couldn't stand anybody on that. I watched it for like half of the first season. I'm like, I can't stand this shit. I'm out, you know? And so 2 or 3 years later, I guess I didn't have anything to do. I started watching it again for some reason. And it was interesting to see how he had grown, you know, from this guy who had no idea what the heck he was doing and just looked up and got a good documentary and then a TV deal out of it to what he has become today. And I have to say, I do have a lot of respect for him and what he does. I think he's overly dramatic a lot of the times. Yeah. But I do have respect for him in the way that he approaches everything, that he really does want to learn. He wants to help and he wants to find out answers. And if for nothing else, he's an animal rights advocate. And I'd respect people who do that too.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I will hold against him forever is #demon. That's the only thing I would say.
Yeah.
#it's a demon.
I understand that too, and that's part of what I don't like about the way that things are heading with the paranormal community now, is that everything's a freaking demon or non-human entity now, you know, and I think we need to re-examine that direction before it gets too late and things get out of hand.
Yeah. I think that there's both. I think you have both. Not in every location, obviously, but
right.
You'll come across things that aren't human spirit, and then you'll come across good old human spirit too. You know, I think there is a good balance. Is that the right word for this? I don't know.
Well, I think that the big thing in the paranormal community now is demons and you know, non-human entities, and that I think can go back to not 100%, but a lot of it can be traced back to Zach Bagans and what his beliefs are and what he puts out on his show. Yeah. And everybody now wants to scream demon or non-human entity before you even find out what's going on. And even, you know, the Ghost Hunters TV show just made its premiere here in the States last night. You know, they're coming back with Grant Wilson. No Jason Hawes, but Grant Wilson and a new team. And even they're saying the reason they're coming back is because, you know, violent hauntings are, you know, on the rise and blah, blah, blah. Well, they're just they're riding that wave, I think, you know, and I really wish people would get away from let's just automatically go to demons and non-human entities. You know, let's find out a little bit more about it first before we put a stamp on it.
No, totally agree with that. So do you watch any of the TV shows these days? And if you do, what ones do you like?
Yeah, I still watch Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures. And I started watching the new Ghost Hunters show. I've got about halfway through it. I'm gonna give it a go and see what that's like. But really, that's really about the only one that I really watch is Ghost Adventures. Now I will say my guilty pleasure is I guess you guys get it over in the States. It's Mountain Monsters. I
haven't heard of that one.
You haven't? Oh my gosh! How could you not have heard of that?
Sorry.
So in a nutshell, it's a bunch of literal rednecks from the hills of West Virginia. And they run around in the woods at night with flashlights and shotguns looking for cryptozoological creatures. And they make these traps and try to catch them in traps and stuff. And it's all 100% scripted, but it's made in a reality TV show style. As a matter of fact, if you talk to anyone who works for the show, they'll say, you know, everything we do is 100% real. There's no script to it. Well, that's obviously bunk, you know. But that's my guilty pleasure because the show is so damn funny. I laugh every time that I watch the show. So I like to see that. If you get the Travel Channel over there, they're coming on the Travel Channel. I'm
going to check that out when it hits the Travel Channel.
Just do it. Do a Google
search.
If
not YouTube it.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, YouTube.
You can find anything on YouTube. Yeah. It's one of the dumbest shows out there, but like I said, it's my guilty pleasure because it's just so funny and it's so fake and it's so over the top. I just watch it and laugh.
You've got to love shows like that, I think.
Yes, I know. My wife is like, I can't believe you watched that dumbass show. She watches like Real Housewives on the Bravo channel of, whatever. And we're always making fun of each other's TV shows because she watches Real Housewives and I watch Mountain Monsters. So we're always picking on each other.
Do you have rows over the remote control?
No, we're pretty good. If we have an evening free where we're going to stay and watch TV, I will get the remote control and get to watch one show, and then I hand it over to her, and she gets to watch her show. And if I ever
just would not happen in the UK.
If it gets to where I just can't stand whatever it is that she's watching, I have another TV upstairs that I can go watch at any time. So.
Oh, that's fair enough then. You've got separate TVs if it gets a problem.
Yes, this is the emergency TV. Yeah.
That's the one in your office, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. In the man cave.
In the man cave. Gotta love it. Sam.
So, do you have anything coming up?
Not really. I have been trying. There's this place called the Old South Pittsburgh Hospital. It's probably maybe about an hour and a half or 2 hours. It's in Nashville. It's in Tennessee, but it's probably about 2 hours away from me. And I've been trying to get down there to do an investigation, and I haven't been able to do it. And now someone has bought the place, and they're commercializing it, and they're wanting to charge for investigations into these overnight hunts and everything. And I've been trying to get down there, and I just can't make it. That's on my bucket list. I'm going to try to get down there and see if I can investigate that and maybe somehow incorporate it into a podcast. But no, I don't have anything just other than, first and third Fridays of every month do my podcast. That's really about it.
And if anybody wants to listen to your podcast, where can they find them?
Oh, man, I am any podcast host out there. You can find it on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, was it Caster FM or Castbox? There's Castbox, Player FM, everywhere but Apple Podcasts. I'm having trouble getting it uploaded to Apple Podcasts. I'm working on that. The host that I use for my podcast is Spreaker. You can hear it on Spreaker, which I know you guys use as well. Or you can go to my website. It's www.parareality.com. You can listen to that right there from the website, or you can go on the archive page and listen to a whole bunch of archived shows. I've got so many shows. I got probably 200 shows. Not archived, but I've done probably 200 or 300 shows that I'm slowly trying to get uploaded onto the server so you can listen to all of those. But yeah, even if you got a smart speaker, just enable one of whatever your preferred method to listen to a podcast is, and just open that out and say play Parareality Radio.
There we go, guys. So we've come to the end of this show, guys.
Sadness.
Before we obviously all say goodbye, obviously the usual close down what I do. If you miss any of the shows, you can obviously go back via the Spreaker app. Just click on the massive PSH Radio name. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. So it's a good night from Kerry.
Good night.
I love your accent.
It's a good night from Sandman.
Good night, everybody.
And it's a good night from me.